The stars above Earth had always been full of mystery. Humanity had looked at them with wonder for thousands of years, dreaming of visitors, of other life, of what might exist beyond the endless sky. But no one truly expected what came that day. The skies darkened not with clouds, but with enormous shadows. Ships, sleek, metallic, and unlike anything seen before, descended from space. They did not come in peace. They came with purpose, with arrogance, and with a weapon they believed. No living being could survive. For countless ages, these conquerors had traveled the galaxy. They had moved from world to world, leaving ruin behind them. Wherever they went, resistance had failed. Civilizations had fallen quickly. Entire planets had been silenced in only days. Their victory was always certain, because they carried with them a secret force. A weapon that never failed. It was not a simple machine or a bomb. It was something far stranger, something grown, alive, and dangerous. When their fleet appeared above Earth, their voices carried through every signal, every screen, every frequency. They declared themselves masters, and they told humanity there was no point in resisting. They promised that Earth, like all the others, would soon bend to their power. For many, fear rose like a wave. Cities went silent. People looked to the skies, wondering if this was the end of everything they had built. But humans were not like the others these aliens had conquered. This was a world shaped by struggle, by hardship, by survival. On Earth, storms destroyed cities. Volcanoes wiped out landscapes, and creatures evolved teeth, claws, and venom just to survive. Humanity had risen through all of that, not by being the strongest, but by being the most adaptable. The conquerors, however, did not understand this. They looked down and saw only another world to crush. The first strike was not made with fire or explosions. No, the conquerors were too proud for that. They wanted humanity to feel helpless. They wanted fear to settle deep inside the human spirit. And so, they released their weapon. It spread invisibly, silently, across the land. It clung to the air, to the soil, to the water. To the aliens, this weapon was the ultimate key to victory. It had ended countless species before. It left no survivors, no defenders, no chance for recovery. It was designed to bring silence. Yet on Earth, something unexpected began to happen. At first, people felt uneasy. They noticed strange changes, plants curling unnaturally, animals avoiding certain areas, a sharp, unfamiliar scent in the air. Warnings spread quickly. Scientists, doctors, and ordinary people all tried to understand what was happening. Was it radiation, a disease, some kind of toxin? Panic might have overtaken them, but instead, something else stirred. Curiosity. Unlike other species, humans had always been explorers. They tasted, they touched, they experimented, sometimes recklessly, sometimes bravely. They refused to simply run or hide. And so, even as the aliens watched from above, expecting terror to spread, they saw something they had never seen before. Humanity leaned closer instead of backing away. People began gathering samples. They began testing the air, the water, and even the strange growths that came with the weapon's release. The conquerors grew confused. They had seen victims collapse in fear before. They had seen entire worlds vanish into silence. But here, on this strange blue planet, humans were asking questions, sharing data, working together to understand what had been unleashed. For them, the weapon was not just a curse. It was a mystery to be solved. In many cities, small groups of people gathered. They whispered, argued, and exchanged ideas late into the night. Farmers, who had always known the soil, looked at how crops reacted. Fishermen studied how the waters changed. Doctors tracked how the human body responded. What was supposed to be a weapon of doom had instead become a puzzle for humanity's endless curiosity. And then, something happened that shook the conquerors. One evening, as the strange substance spread across a rural village, people noticed animals approaching, sniffing it and even eating it. Instead of dying, some seemed energized. The humans who saw this were cautious at first, but caution soon gave way to bravery. They had faced poisonous plants before, venomous snakes, and dangerous animals. Testing the unknown was part of their history. The aliens watched in disbelief as some humans dared to taste what had been released. To the conquerors, this was impossible. Their weapon was supposed to destroy, to break, to leave nothing alive. Yet here were these humans, chewing slowly, analyzing the taste, the reaction, and even passing it around to others. They wrote notes. They laughed nervously, and in time, they grew more confident. The conquerors had arrived certain of their victory. They believed fear would spread like wildfire, that Earth would fall as easily as all the others. But instead, they saw something else rising, not fear but defiance. Humanity was not crumbling. Humanity was learning. The weapon, meant to silence, had become the first spark of resistance. For the aliens, this was not just unexpected, it was dangerous. If their ultimate weapon could not bring Earth to its knees, then their entire empire might face a challenge unlike any before. In the streets, in the fields, in the hidden corners of the world, humans whispered to one another. They did not say, "We are doomed." They said, "We will understand this. We will survive this. We will not be broken." And so the story of Earth's fight began, not with explosions or armies, but with curiosity, courage, and the refusal to bow down. The aliens had brought their deadliest weapon to a world they thought was weak. But they had forgotten one simple truth. This was Earth, and its people had faced death 1,000 times before. This was only the beginning. The skies above Earth remained heavy with the silent presence of the alien fleet. Their ships hung like watchful predators, waiting for their weapon to do its work. The invaders expected to see despair on the faces of humans, to hear silence in the cities, to watch a planet fall to its knees. Yet what they saw instead puzzled them. Humanity did not vanish. Humanity stood uncertain but unbroken. The weapon was everywhere. It clung to the air and drifted through rivers and oceans. Strange growths spread across fields, glowing faintly. Under the moonlight, as if the earth itself had been infected by something unnatural. Farmers walked cautiously among their ruined crops, watching the vines twist into new shapes. Doctors studied patients who coughed, sweated, or felt sudden changes in their bodies. Soldiers stood ready, not with confidence, but with determination to protect what remained. It was fear, yes, but not surrender. Humanity faced the unknown every day in its history. People had endured plagues, wars, and natural disasters that seemed unstoppable. This new threat was terrifying, but it was not enough to erase the human instinct to fight, to adapt, to survive. Families huddled together and whispered words of courage. Communities gathered to share knowledge and resources. Humanity, instead of breaking apart, began to knit itself tighter. The aliens could not understand this. On every other world, their weapon had spread chaos. Civilizations had turned on themselves, fighting and collapsing as the strange force consumed them. But humans reacted differently. They organized, they studied, they resisted fear. The invaders, watching from orbit, grew uneasy. Scientists worked around the clock, setting up makeshift labs in basements, hospitals, and even abandoned warehouses. They studied the weapon as if it were a puzzle left by nature itself. Samples were collected, microscopes hummed, notes were scribbled. Humanity had no clear plan, but it had something more powerful: curiosity and stubbornness. And then came a strange discovery. While the weapon twisted plants and sickened animals, some humans who touched or even accidentally consumed parts of it seemed unaffected. A few even showed signs of increased strength, sharper focus, or bursts of energy that could not be explained. At first, people thought it was chance or luck, but as more reports came in, patterns began to appear. The aliens noticed it too. They expected cries of agony, but instead they heard laughter from some villages, disbelief from towns, and rumors spreading across cities. Some of us can survive this. Some of us can even use it. The conquerors had never seen anything like it. On other worlds, the weapon meant extinction. On Earth, it became a challenge. Humanity was not only enduring, it was learning to live with the very thing that was supposed to destroy it. But the threat was still real. Many people grew sick. Crops failed in some regions. Panic simmered under the surface even as hope flickered. Cities stood on edge, watching the skies, waiting for the next move. The aliens wanted Earth to surrender, but no surrender came. Instead, broadcasts spread across the planet. Voices urging people to hold on, to adapt, to find strength in unity. Ordinary men and women became leaders in their own ways. A farmer who had seen crops ruined by droughts before reminded his neighbors that survival was not about comfort, but about endurance. A doctor who had fought through past outbreaks told her patients that the unknown was frightening, but not unbeatable. A soldier standing guard at a checkpoint reminded his companions that humanity had never won by giving up. The alien fleet grew restless. Their weapon, their pride, was failing them here. They considered firepower, bombardments, direct attacks, but something held them back. Perhaps it was arrogance, or perhaps it was fear of wasting their resources. Whatever the reason, they continued to wait, hoping their creation would eventually succeed. Meanwhile, humanity pressed forward. Groups began experimenting with the weapon, not just in labs, but in everyday life. People tested it in cooking, carefully mixing small amounts into food. Hunters and gatherers tried feeding it to animals, observing the effects. Slowly, humans realized that the danger was not absolute. For some, it was deadly, but for others, it was tolerable. For a few, it was almost beneficial. Stories spread quickly. In one village, a man who ate the strange growth survived with no harm, even claiming it gave him renewed energy. In another city, a child accidentally touched the infected water and, instead of growing weak, seemed healthier afterward. These stories sparked curiosity and courage across the world. The aliens grew angry. From orbit, they sent warnings, threatening destruction if Earth did not kneel. But the words no longer carried the weight they once did. Humanity had seen the weapon, had faced it, and had not fallen. The fear that should have broken them had instead forged something stronger. Everywhere, people repeated a simple truth. If this weapon cannot destroy us, then nothing can. Still, the struggle was far from over. The weapon's spread made life harder every day. Food was scarcer, water needed constant testing, and the strange substance seemed to grow stronger the more it lingered. Entire regions became unsafe, glowing with alien corruption. But humanity refused to abandon them completely. Explorers went in, sometimes never returning, but always leaving behind knowledge for the rest. It was not just survival anymore, it was defiance. Humanity was telling the invaders, "You cannot break us." The aliens, for the first time in their long history of conquest, felt uncertainty. They had expected another easy victory, another silent planet added to their empire. Instead, they faced a species that turned terror into a challenge, pain into knowledge, and fear into courage. The threat was real, but so was the human spirit. And as days passed, something even greater began to stir. Unity. People from different lands, different beliefs, and different walks of life put aside old divisions. They were not divided nations anymore. They were one species, facing the same enemy under the same sky. In this unity, strength grew. Scientists shared discoveries across borders, farmers exchanged survival techniques, doctors spread knowledge from one continent to another. soldiers, trained not just to fight, but to protect communities and give hope. Ordinary families carried on with stubborn courage, proving that life, even in the shadow of a weapon meant to kill them, would not be silenced. The conquerors had unleashed their deadliest creation, and it had failed to achieve its purpose. Humanity had faced the threat, and while the danger remained, the fear had begun to vanish. In its place was something the aliens had never expected: determination. And as the fleets waited, as the weapon continued to spread, and as Earth's people worked together like never before, a new thought grew quietly in the hearts of humanity. If they could endure this, if they could take the worst weapon of a galactic empire and still stand tall, then perhaps, just perhaps, they were not the ones who should be afraid. The aliens had brought fear to Earth, but now it was humanity preparing to return that fear, stronger than ever before. This was no longer just survival. This was the beginning of something far greater. The alien fleet still lingered above Earth, silent and watchful. From their perspective, humanity should have already collapsed. Their deadliest weapon had been unleashed, a force that had brought other civilizations to their knees. Yet Earth still stood. It was scarred, yes, it was struggling, yes, but it was alive. The people had not surrendered. They had adapted. At first, the invaders thought it was only a matter of time. They assumed humans were merely delaying the inevitable, clinging to a fragile hope. But the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Instead of fading, humanity was growing stronger. And then, something happened that no one expected. It began quietly. A few farmers, desperate for food, experimented with the strange growth that had covered their lands. They cooked it, boiled it, burned it, mixed it with other foods. Most attempts failed, but then came the moment that changed everything. Some of it was edible. Not only edible, but strangely nourishing. The very substance designed to poison and destroy humanity was, under the right conditions, a source of strength. When the first report spread, people thought it was a joke. But then more and more communities confirmed the same thing. The alien weapon, twisted and terrifying in its raw form, could be turned into food. For some, it became almost like medicine, restoring health instead of taking it. This discovery swept through the human population like wildfire. Where once there had been fear, now there was cautious excitement. Scientists worked endlessly to understand why. Families experimented in their kitchens. Street vendors in cities began to sell strange meals made with the glowing plants, daring others to try. People gathered in marketplaces not to panic, but to share recipes. The aliens watching from orbit could not believe what they were seeing. Their most fearsome weapon was being served at dinner tables. What had been designed to be a curse was becoming a blessing. The fleet commanders argued among themselves. This had never happened before. How could these fragile beings not only resist but also thrive? On Earth, this was the turning point. For the first time since the weapon had been unleashed, humanity no longer felt like prey. They felt powerful. They looked at the skies differently, not with dread, but with determination. Children who had once been afraid of the glowing vines now laughed at them, chasing each other through fields. Adults began to speak openly about the possibility of victory. It was not just about survival anymore. It was about defiance. It was about showing the invaders that humanity could not be broken. The discovery united people even more. Nations that had once competed against each other now exchanged knowledge freely. Scientists who had never spoken before shared discoveries across borders. Farmers in one continent taught others how to grow the alien plants safely. Doctors in distant lands exchanged cures and treatments. It no longer mattered where someone was from. They were all human, facing the same enemy. The aliens had expected Earth to fall apart. Instead, Earth had grown stronger. In villages, people who once feared stepping outside their homes now gathered for communal meals, eating the very thing meant to kill them. In cities, people painted murals on walls, showing humans standing tall against alien shadows. Soldiers who once only guarded checkpoints now trained not just for defense, but with a new purpose, to be ready for the day humanity would fight back. The psychological shift was enormous. The weapon no longer inspired terror. It became a symbol of resilience. Humanity had not only survived it, they had turned it into something useful. The fear that had once lingered in every heart began to vanish, replaced by something else: pride. The aliens tried to respond. They released more of the weapon, intensifying its spread, thinking that humanity's luck would run out. But the opposite happened. Each new wave only gave humans more material to study, more chances to adapt. What had been intended as destruction now became abundance. Crops grew again, but now they grew side by side with the alien growths. Farmers harvested both, feeding their people and proving that Earth could not be starved. This was the true turning point. Humanity had crossed from survival into control. The weapon was no longer the invader's advantage. It was humanity's. For the first time, the alien fleet considered retreat. They had conquered countless worlds, but never like this. Never had they faced a species that could bend their greatest strength into weakness. Their silence in the skies grew heavier not with confidence but with doubt. On Earth, people began to speak boldly. They talked not just about surviving, but about fighting back. Songs were sung about resilience. Stories spread of families who thrived despite the invasion. Artists painted the skies with symbols of hope. Every act of daily life became an act of defiance. Children who had been born during the invasion grew up without fear of the alien weapon. To them, it was just part of the world, something their parents had already conquered. They played in fields where alien vines glowed, as if those fields had always belonged to them. This new generation carried no memory of despair, only stories of courage. The invaders had lost something far more important than a battle. They had lost control of fear. For humanity, this was not just about food or survival. It was about identity. They had proven to themselves and to the galaxy watching that they were unbreakable. Where others had fallen, they had risen. Where others had been destroyed, they had adapted. The weapon that had ended worlds was now part of their daily lives. The moment humans realized this, everything changed. They no longer looked to the skies as victims. They looked as challengers. The invaders had brought war, but they had also given humanity a gift they had never intended: unity, resilience, and the belief that nothing was impossible. And so the turning point was not marked by a battle. It was not marked by the fall of cities or the destruction of fleets. It was marked by a simple, ordinary thing: a meal shared among people, made from the very weapon that was supposed to destroy them. From that point on, Earth was never the same, and neither were the aliens watching from above. Because in that moment, the galaxy learned a truth it had never known before. Humanity was not just another world to conquer. Humanity was different. Humanity was dangerous. And for the first time, the invaders were the ones who felt fear. The silence of the alien fleet above Earth grew heavier with every passing day. For them, the war had taken a strange turn. It was supposed to be over the moment they unleashed their deadliest weapon. Yet instead of breaking, humanity had bent, the weapon to its will. The invaders had hoped for despair, but Earth had answered with resilience. And from that resilience grew something greater: defiance. The defiance of humanity did not appear in one sudden act, like a great battle or explosion. It grew quietly, like a seed planted in soil. It spread through homes, streets, farms, schools, and cities. It lived in conversations between families who refused to give up. It lived in the laughter of children who no longer feared the alien vines glowing in the fields. It lived in the determination of scientists, workers, and farmers who transformed. fear into knowledge and survival. The true legacy of this defiance was not just in what people ate or how they survived, it was in how they changed. Humanity began to see itself differently. For centuries, people had divided themselves by borders, languages, beliefs, and disagreements. But under the shadow of the alien threat, those differences seemed small. The realization was simple, but powerful. They were all human, and their survival depended on standing together. This unity became one of the greatest strengths of Earth. A farmer in one part of the world could share methods for cooking the alien plants, and within days, that knowledge would spread across continents. A scientist in another land could make a discovery about the strange properties of the weapon, and within weeks, the breakthrough was used everywhere. Barriers that had once separated nations collapsed. Humanity was no longer just a collection of countries. It was one people facing one challenge. The invaders, watching from their ships, could not comprehend this. They had expected humans to fight each other, to crumble under stress, to turn against their own kind. That was what had happened on other worlds. But humans were different. The very pressure that was meant to break them had forged them together like steel. Defiance showed itself not only in unity, but also in creativity. People began to use the alien growths in ways no one had imagined. Builders experimented with the strange materials, creating stronger walls and durable shelters. Doctors studied it for cures, finding ways to treat illnesses that had plagued humanity for centuries. Artists painted murals using its glowing colors, turning ruins into canvases of hope. What was once a weapon of destruction had become a tool of culture and life. The greatest change, however, was in spirit. Humanity had learned to live without fear. Fear had been the aliens' true weapon, more than anything they dropped from their ships. When that weapon was broken, everything shifted. People began to walk taller. Soldiers who once defended barricades now trained to march forward. Civilians who once hid indoors now gathered in the open, speaking boldly about their future. And what a future it looked to be. The knowledge gained during the struggle did not fade away once survival was secured. It spread into every corner of human life. Children in schools learned not just reading and writing, but also the story of how their people had turned death into life. They were taught not to fear the unknown, but to face it with curiosity and courage. This lesson, passed down, became the heart of the legacy. The invaders began to sense this change, and for the first time in their long history of conquest, they hesitated. They had faced countless civilizations, and every time their weapons had been enough. But now, their strongest weapon had been reshaped into humanity's strength. Retreat was not part of their nature, yet staying too long meant facing something they could not control. They looked at Earth and saw not a planet to conquer, but a people who would never kneel. On Earth, the defiance became more than survival. It became identity. Songs were sung around fires about how humanity had stood against the impossible. Stories spread of communities that thrived in the darkest days. Families passed down recipes that had once been acts of desperation, but now were celebrated traditions. Every meal shared, every laugh exchanged, every child born into a world still under threat was an act of quiet defiance. The world did not return to the way it was before. It could not. Too much had changed. Humanity had learned a lesson written, not in books, but in life itself. They were capable of surviving anything, of transforming even the darkest curse into light. This belief would remain with them forever, and so the legacy of defiance was not just about that moment in history, it was about the future it created. It was about the way humans began to explore again, not only their own planet, but the skies above. With the knowledge of the alien weapon, they advanced faster than ever before. Machines were built, new medicines discovered, new ways of farming perfected. The weapon that had been meant to destroy them became the foundation of their greatest progress. The invaders had intended to erase humanity, but instead they had forced humanity to rise higher. The irony was not lost on the people of Earth. The very presence of the enemy had made them stronger, sharper, braver. What was meant to be their end had become their beginning. Generations later, children would still listen to the stories of that time. They would hear how their ancestors had faced a power that had destroyed worlds, and how they had not only survived but turned it into something good. The children would laugh at the idea of fear, for they had been raised in the light of resilience. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, the story of Earth spread. Other civilizations, once conquered or in hiding, heard whispers of what humanity had done. Some did not believe it at first, for it seemed impossible, but others found hope. If humans could defy such a weapon, maybe they too could rise. Humanities. Defiance was not just for themselves, it became a symbol to others, a spark in the dark universe. The aliens, on the other hand, carried their own legacy. They had been the ones to unleash their deadliest creation, only to watch it fail. Their reputation, once built on fear, now carried cracks. No longer were they untouchable. For the first time, they had faced defeat without a single shot being fired at them. The fear they once inspired began to weaken, replaced by doubt. For humanity, the legacy of defiance meant something deeper. It was not only about victory, it was about transformation. They had discovered something about themselves that they might never have known otherwise. They were not fragile. They were not helpless. They were adaptable, creative, and unbreakable. This lesson would echo through every future challenge. Whenever hardship came, people remembered the time when they had eaten the very thing that was meant to kill them, when they had turned a weapon into nourishment, when they had taken fear and made it powerless. The defiance had become part of who they were, and so the war ended not with a final battle, not with a great explosion, but with silence. Silence in the skies as the alien fleet lingered and then slowly withdrew. Silence on Earth as people looked upward, knowing they had not just survived, they had won. The legacy of defiance lived on in every corner of the world, carried in every story, every song, every child born into freedom. It was a reminder to all that humanity could never be conquered, because the greatest weapon humanity had was not steel, not fire, not technology. It was their spirit. And that spirit had proven unshakable. That was the true legacy of defiance.